The stagecoach rattled into Deadwood, Dakota territory on a blistering afternoon in July 1876, carrying a woman who had decided to become someone new or die trying. Rosalind Harper pressed her gloved hand against the dusty window, watching miners and prospectors swarm the muddy streets like ants on spilled sugar, their dreams of gold glittering in their eyes just as desperately as her own dream of redemption burned in her chest. She had exactly $12 to her name, a carpet bag containing 3 dresses that had seen better days, and a past she would bury 6 feet deep if given half a chance. The driver's voice boomed from above, announcing their arrival at the Grand Central Hotel, and Rosalind straightened her spine, smoothing down the plain gray traveling dress she had purchased specifically because it screamed respectability. No ruffles, no bright colors, no hint of the life she had left behind in Dodge City. She had spent 3 years dancing in the Alhambra saloon, spinning in circles while men shouted and drank and occasionally fought over who would buy her the next drink. The money had been decent, better than she could have made as a seamstress or a laundress, but the cost had been steep in ways that did not involve currency. When she stepped down from the stagecoach, the heat hit her like a physical wall, and the smell of unwashed bodies, horse manure, and something cooking that might have been stew assaulted her senses. Deadwood was bigger than she had expected, more chaotic, more alive with desperate energy. Men outnumbered women 20 to 1 at least, and she felt eyes on her immediately, assessing, calculating, wondering. She kept her gaze forward and her chin up, projecting a confidence she did not entirely feel. The Grand Central Hotel was impressive by frontier standards, 3 stories of rough-hewn lumber that somehow managed to look almost elegant despite its surroundings. Rosalind approached the desk where a thin man with spectacles perched on his nose looked up from a ledger. "I am inquiring about the position advertised in the Leadville newspaper," she said, her voice steady and clear, "for a cook and housekeeper." The man's eyebrows rose slightly. "You came all the way from Leadville for this?" "I came from farther than that," Rosalind replied. "But yes, I am a hard worker, I can cook for large groups, and I keep a clean establishment." "The position is not here at the hotel," the man explained, adjusting his spectacles. "It is for a cattle ranch about 15 miles south of town, the Bar M Ranch. Owner is Jack McCord. He comes into town every Saturday for supplies. That would be tomorrow. You could speak with him then, or I could send word if you want to wait." Rosalind's heart sank slightly. A ranch. That meant isolation. Distance from town, from people, from the anonymity she had hoped a busy place like Deadwood might provide. But it also meant distance from the kind of men who might recognize her, who might have passed through Dodge City and remembered her face from the dance floor. "I will wait and speak with him tomorrow," she decided. "Do you have a room available?" $2 a night, meals included." She winced internally at the expense but nodded, counting out the coins from her small purse. The room was tiny, barely larger than a closet, with a narrow bed and a washstand, but it was clean, and the sheets smelled of lye soap. She sat on the edge of the bed and allowed herself one moment of uncertainty, one moment where she wondered if she had made a terrible mistake leaving everything familiar behind. But no. Dodge City had been killing her slowly, stripping away pieces of her soul with every false smile, every dance with hands that wandered, every evening that blurred into the next. She was 23 years old and had felt ancient. This was her chance to become the woman she might have been if circumstances had been different. If her father had not died and left them destitute, if her mother had not succumbed to pneumonia the following winter, if Rosalind had not been 17 and desperate and willing to take any work that kept her fed. That night, she ate dinner in the hotel dining room, a surprisingly good beef stew with fresh bread, and listened to the conversation swirling around her. Gold strikes and claim disputes, stories of fortunes won and lost, tales of Wild Bill Hickok who had been shot dead just weeks ago right here in Deadwood. The town felt like it was balanced on a knife's edge between civilization and chaos. Saturday morning arrived with the sound of wagons and horses filling the street as ranchers and miners came to town for their weekly business. Rosalind dressed carefully in her best dress, a deep blue cotton that brought out her eyes and pinned her dark hair into a neat bun at the nape of her neck. When she came downstairs, the desk clerk spotted her immediately. "That is McCord over there," he said, nodding toward a tall man loading supplies into a wagon outside. "The one in the black hat." Rosalind's breath caught slightly. Jack McCord was not what she had expected. Most ranchers she had seen were weathered, bent from hard labor, aged beyond their years. This man moved with an easy strength, his shoulders broad beneath a worn chambray shirt, his face shadowed by the brim of his hat, but what she could see was angular and strong-jawed. He looked to be perhaps 30, maybe a year or two older, and there was something in the way he moved that suggested capability, competence, a man who knew exactly what he was doing. She stepped outside into the morning sun, gathering her courage like a cloak around her. As she approached, he looked up, and she found herself meeting eyes the color of whiskey held up to lamplight, amber and gold, and warm. "Mr. McCord?" she asked. "Yes, ma'am." He straightened, pulling off his work gloves. Up close he was even more striking, with sun-bronzed skin and fine lines around his eyes that spoke of years squinting into bright horizons. "Can I help you?" "My name is Rosalind Harper. I understand you are looking for a cook and housekeeper. I have come to inquire about the position." Something shifted in his expression, surprise perhaps, or maybe skepticism. "You came all the way to Deadwood to work as a ranch cook?" "I came to Deadwood for a fresh start," she said honestly. "The position would be part of that start." He studied her for a long moment, and she forced herself not to fidget under that steady gaze. "I will be direct with you, Miss Harper. The ranch is not fancy. I have 12 men working for me, and they are good men, but they are cowboys, rough around the edges. The last cook I had was a man named Cookie who was 65 and mean as a snake. The men were scared of him, which kept things orderly. You do not look particularly frightening." Despite herself, Rosalind smiled slightly. "I am tougher than I look, Mr. McCord. I have worked in establishments where managing rough men was part of the job description." She realized her mistake the moment the words left her mouth, the implication hanging in the air between them. His eyes narrowed slightly. "What kind of establishments?" Her heart hammered against her ribs. This was it. The moment where she could lie, could invent a respectable past for herself, boarding houses or restaurants or hotels, but something in his direct gaze made her want to offer truth, or at least a version of it. "I worked in a saloon," she admitted, lifting her chin. "As a dance hall girl. But I assure you, Mr. McCord, I can cook and I can keep house, and I'm looking for honest work doing exactly that." The silence stretched between them, and she watched emotions flicker across his face too quickly to name. She prepared herself for rejection, for judgment, for the conversation to end right here on this dusty street. Instead, Jack McCord surprised her. "Can you make biscuits?" She blinked. "Yes, light and fluffy, or so I have been told." "Can you cook for 14 people 3 times a day?" "Yes." "Can you handle laundry and basic mending?" "Yes." He nodded slowly, as if making a decision. "The work is hard, Miss Harper. The hours are long. You would have your own cabin near the main house, small but private. Meals would be taken in the bunkhouse cookhouse. I pay $30 a month plus room and board. You would have Sundays off after breakfast is served, and you could come into town if you arrange for someone to fix the evening meal. The men will treat you respectfully, or they will answer to me. What you did before you came here is your business, not mine." Rosalind felt something loosen in her chest, a knot she had been carrying for so long she had forgotten it was there. "Are you offering me the position?" "I am offering you a trial period," he clarified, 1 month. If it works out, the job is yours for as long as you want it. If it does not work out, I will pay you for the time worked and arrange transportation back to Deadwood. Fair enough?" "More than fair," she said, and meant it. "Thank you, Mr. McCord." "Call me Jack," he said. "No point in being formal if we are going to be working together. I will finish loading the wagon and we can head out within the hour. Do you have belongings to collect?" "Just 1 bag at the hotel." "Get it and meet me back here. Bring anything you need for the next few weeks because we will not be coming back to town until supplies run low again. The ride to the Bar M Ranch took 3 hours, following a rough trail that wound through hills dotted with ponderosa pines and scrub oak. Jack kept the horses at a steady pace, pointing out landmarks along the way, explaining the boundaries of his land, talking about the cattle business in a way that suggested both pride and pragmatism. Rosalind listened, asking occasional questions, learning that he had started the ranch 5 years ago with money saved from years working as a trail boss, that he ran about 800 head of cattle, that he hoped to expand now that the railroad was pushing west and making it easier to get beef to market. "What made you choose ranching?" she asked as they crested a hill, and she saw the spread below, a collection of buildings nestled in a valley with a creek running silver through green pasture. "I got tired of moving," he said simply. "Spent 10 years driving cattle from Texas to Kansas, then to Colorado, then to Montana. Same trail, different year, always heading somewhere else. I wanted to put down roots, build something that would last. This land spoke to me the first time I saw it. Good water, good grass, protected from the worst weather by these hills. It felt like home." There was something in his voice when he said that last word, a longing that resonated with something deep inside Rosalind's chest. Home. She had not had one of those in a very long time. The ranch was more substantial than she had expected. The main house was a solid structure of logs and stone with a covered porch. The bunkhouse was long and low, and beside it stood the cookhouse, a separate building with a stovepipe chimney. There were barns, corrals, a smokehouse, a root cellar, all the infrastructure of a working ranch. And set apart about 50 yards from the other buildings was a small cabin with a single window and a door painted blue. "That would be yours," Jack said, nodding toward it. "Cookie lived there for 2 years. It has been empty for about a month since he decided his joints could not take another winter and headed back to Texas. I had the men clean it out, but it might need a woman's touch." When he helped her down from the wagon, his hands were strong and steady on her waist, and she was aware of the warmth of him, the scent of leather and soap and something else, something essentially masculine. He released her quickly, stepping back, and she wondered if he had felt that same jolt of awareness. The cabin was sparse but clean, containing a narrow bed, a small table with one chair, a trunk for storage, and pegs on the wall for hanging clothes. A colorful rag rug covered part of the plank floor, and gingham curtains hung at the window. It was the smallest space she had lived in since childhood, but it was hers, private, a place where she could close the door and simply be. "I will let you settle in," Jack said from the doorway. "Come up to the cookhouse when you're ready, and I will show you the kitchen. Introduce you to the men. They should be coming in for supper in about 3 hours." 3 hours. That gave her time to unpack her few belongings, to explore the kitchen, to figure out what she was working with. She changed into a simple work dress, rolled up her sleeves, and made her way to the cookhouse with determination in every step. The kitchen was larger than she had expected, with a massive cast iron stove, long work tables, shelves lined with supplies, and a storage room that held sacks of flour, beans, and cornmeal. There was a smokehouse with hanging bacon and ham, a spring house keeping butter and milk cool, and a vegetable garden behind the building that clearly needed attention but showed promising signs of squash, beans, and tomatoes. Rosalind tied an apron around her waist and got to work. She found a haunch of venison in the smokehouse and set it to roasting peeled potatoes until her fingers cramped, mixed up biscuit dough using the sourdough starter she found fermenting in a crock, and put together a dried apple pie because there was a bag of withered apples that needed using. By the time the sun was starting its descent toward the western hills, the cookhouse smelled like heaven, rich and savory and sweet all at once. The men came in dusty and tired, talking amongst themselves until they saw her standing by the stove, and then silence fell like a curtain. She counted 12 cowboys, ranging in age from a kid who could not have been more than 18 to a grizzled man with gray in his beard who looked at her with shrewd, assessing eyes. Jack came in last, and she saw him take in the scene, the laden table, the smells, the uncertain faces of his crew. "Men, this is Miss Rosalind Harper," he announced. "She is our new cook. You will treat her with respect. You will keep your language clean in her presence, and you will thank the good Lord someone who actually knows what they are doing is handling meals now, because I was about 2 days from having to do the cooking myself, and we all know that would have been a disaster." That got a ripple of laughter broke the tension. The men found seats at the long table, and Rosalind began serving, heaping plates with venison, potatoes, biscuits, gravy. She watched their faces as they took their first bites, saw eyes widen, heard the appreciative murmurs. "Ma'am, these biscuits are lighter than clouds," the young kid said, his face flushing red as the words tumbled out. "Begging your pardon for speaking out, but I have not had anything this good since my mama's cooking back in Missouri." "Thank you," Rosalind said, feeling warmth spread through her chest. "I'm glad you are enjoying it." The older cowboy with the gray beard nodded at her. "Name's Walt. I have been with the Bar M since the beginning. Speaking for the men, we are mighty pleased to have you here, Miss Harper. Cookie could burn water. Honest truth. This is a real treat." Dinner passed in a blur of serving, clearing, and slicing pie. The men ate like they had been starving, going back for seconds and thirds, and Rosalind found herself smiling despite her exhaustion. This felt right, felt good, providing something essential, and being appreciated for it. Not for how she looked or how she moved, but for what she could do, for the skill in her hands. After the men had gone back to the bunkhouse, Jack stayed to help her clean up despite her protests. They worked in companionable silence, washing dishes, wiping down tables, banking the fire in the stove for the night. "You did well today," he said as they finished. "Really well. The men were impressed, and that is not easy to do." "I am glad," Rosalind said. "I want to earn my place here." He looked at her then, really looked at her, and she felt pinned by that amber gaze. "Can I ask you something?" Her stomach tightened. "Yes." "Why did you leave? The saloon work, I mean. If it is too personal, you do not have to answer." Rosalind dried her hands slowly on her apron, considering her words. "Because I was disappearing," she said finally. "Becoming someone I did not recognize when I looked in the mirror. The money was decent, but the cost was too high. I wanted to be more than just a pretty face spinning in circles while men drank themselves stupid. I wanted to matter." "You matter here," Jack said quietly. "What you do matters. Keeping men fed and content, that is important work on a ranch like this. Do not ever think otherwise." Something passed between them in that moment, something fragile and promising, like the first green shoots pushing through soil in spring. Rosalind felt her breath catch, felt her heart do something complicated in her chest. "Thank you," she whispered, "for giving me a chance." "Thank you for taking it," he replied, and then he was gone, walking out into the purple twilight, leaving her alone with the lingering warmth of his words. The days fell into a rhythm. Rosalind rose before dawn to get breakfast started, feeding the men biscuits and gravy, eggs when the chickens were laying, bacon and flapjacks, and endless pots of coffee strong enough to strip paint. The men would scatter to their various tasks, mending fences, moving cattle, breaking horses, whatever the day required. She would spend the morning preparing the midday meal, washing dishes, doing laundry in the big copper tub behind the cookhouse, mending shirts and sewing on buttons. Afternoons meant starting supper, another massive undertaking, more cooking and serving and cleaning. By the time she collapsed into her bed each night, she was bone-tired and deeply satisfied in a way she had never been dancing. Jack was a constant presence, sometimes helping with heavy lifting, sometimes just sitting at the table with a cup of coffee while she worked, talking about the ranch, about his plans, about the challenges of building something in country this wild. She learned that he had grown up in Missouri, the youngest of 4 brothers, that his parents had died of cholera when he was 16, that he had headed west because there was nothing left for him back east. He had worked hard, saved carefully, and bet everything on this ranch. "Does it ever scare you?" she asked one evening as they sat on the cookhouse steps, watching the sun set in a blaze of orange and gold. "Having everything you care about tied up in one place, one venture?" "Every single day," he admitted. "A drought could wipe me out. Disease could tear through the herd. Cattle prices could drop. There are 100 ways this could all fall apart, but the alternative is not building anything at all, not caring about anything enough to risk losing it, and that seems like a worse way to live. Rosalind understood that more than he knew. She had protected herself for so long, keeping everyone at arm's length, refusing to care too much or want too much, because wanting things gave them the power to hurt you. But sitting here in the fading light with the smell of pine in the air, and this man beside her who saw her as more than just what she had been, she felt those protective walls beginning to crack. 3 weeks into her employment, one of the cowboys got kicked by a horse and broke his arm. Jack rode into Deadwood to fetch the doctor, and Rosalind found herself thrust into the role of nurse, helping set the bone, keeping the injured man comfortable, making sure infection did not set in. She sat up with him through the night, applying cool compresses when fever took hold, spooning broth between cracked lips, and by morning when the fever broke, she was exhausted but triumphant. Jack found her asleep in a chair beside the sick man's bunk when he returned with the doctor. He watched her for a moment, this woman who had worked as a dance hall girl, but who had just spent a night fighting for a cowboy's life with the fierce determination of a battlefield nurse. The doctor examined the patient, pronounced the bone well set and the man likely to make a full recovery. And when Rosalind woke to find both men looking at her, she flushed with embarrassment. "Sorry," she mumbled, pushing hair out of her face. "I did not mean to fall asleep." "You saved his life," Jack said simply. "Or at least, his arm. Doc says you did everything exactly right." The injured cowboy, a man named Pete, who was usually quiet, reached out with his good hand and squeezed her fingers. "Thank you, Miss Harper. I owe you." "You owe me nothing," she said. "Just heal up and get back to work." But something had shifted. The men looked at her differently now, not just as the cook, but as someone who belonged, someone who would fight for them when needed. Walt started leaving wildflowers on the cookhouse steps. Young Billy began carving her a set of wooden spoons as a gift. Even the more standoffish cowboys made an effort to thank her after every meal. And Jack looked at her like she was something precious, something worth protecting. She caught him watching her sometimes, his expression unguarded, and the heat in his eyes made her feel things she had thought she had lost the capacity to feel. Want, longing, hope. Late summer brought a cattle drive, moving part of the herd to new grazing land in the higher elevations. The ranch would be down to a skeleton crew for a week, just Walt and Billy staying behind to maintain things, which meant Rosalind would have lighter duties. Jack approached her the evening before the drive was set to leave. "I want you to come into town while we are gone," he said, "as take the wagon, spend a few days, buy yourself anything you need. Consider it a bonus for all the hard work." "I do not need anything," Rosalind protested. "Then buy things you want," he said. "A new dress, books, whatever catches your eye. You have earned it." She did go to town, though more because he had asked than because she wanted anything. Deadwood had grown even more chaotic in the month since she had last seen it, with new buildings going up daily, more people flooding in chasing gold and fortune. She bought fabric to make new curtains for her cabin, a book of poetry because she had always loved reading, and on impulse a deep green dress that was impractical for ranch work but made her eyes look bright and her skin glow. She was walking back to where she had left the wagon when a voice called out behind her. "Rose? Rose Williams, is that you?" Her blood turned to ice. She knew that voice. Slowly, she turned to see Frank Garrett, a gambler who had spent months in Dodge City and had been one of the regulars at the Alhambra. He was grinning, clearly pleased to have recognized her, and she felt her carefully constructed new life threatening to collapse around her ears. "I am sorry," she said, keeping her voice level. "You have mistaken me for someone else. My name is Rosalind Harper." "Come on now, Rose," Frank said, moving closer. "I would know you anywhere. Those eyes, that face. You were the prettiest dancer in the whole place. What are you doing in Deadwood? Working one of the saloons here?" "I said you have mistaken me for someone else," Rosalind repeated, her voice harder now. Please leave me alone." She turned and walked away quickly, her heart hammering, her purchases clutched to her chest. She did not look back, just climbed into the wagon and got the horses moving as fast as she dared through the crowded streets. But she knew Frank Garrett, knew his type. He would not let this go. He would talk, would spread the word that Rose Williams, the dance hall girl, was living outside town. And eventually that information would make its way to the wrong ears. The drive to the ranch felt like it took forever. By the time she pulled into the yard, dusk was falling and her hands were shaking. Walt came out to help unhitch the horses, took one look at her face, and frowned. "Miss Harper? You all right? You look like you have seen a ghost." "I am fine," she lied. "Just tired from the trip." But she was not fine. She paced her small cabin as darkness fell, trying to figure out what to do. Should she tell Jack? Should she pack her things and leave before anyone found out, before her past could taint his reputation? The ranch was doing well, and having a woman with her history on the property could damage the respect he had built, could cost him business with more conservative ranchers and businessmen. She barely slept that night, and the next day passed in a fog of anxiety. Jack and the men returned in the evening, dusty and tired but pleased with the success of the drive. Rosalind forced herself to act normally, serving dinner, cleaning up, accepting compliments on the roast chicken and fresh bread. But she felt Jack's eyes on her, knew he sensed something was wrong. After the men had gone to the bunkhouse, he cornered her in the cookhouse. "What happened?" "Nothing happened. Rosalind." He said her name like it mattered, like she mattered. "Something is wrong. You have not smiled once since I got back. Talk to me." She felt the walls she had built around her heart crumbling, felt tears burning behind her eyes, and suddenly the whole story came spilling out. The man in Deadwood who had recognized her, the fear that her past would ruin everything she had built here, the certainty that she should leave before she caused him problems. Jack listened without interrupting, his face unreadable. When she finally ran out of words, he was quiet for a long moment, and she braced herself for disappointment, for rejection, for the end of this brief, shining chapter of her life. "So let me make sure I understand," he said slowly. "You are thinking about leaving because someone recognized you from your old life?" "It is not just that," Rosalind said, wrapping her arms around herself. "If word spreads, if people know what I was, it could hurt your reputation. You have worked so hard to build this place, to earn respect. I will not be the reason you lose that." "And you think I care more about what narrow-minded people think than I care about you?" She looked up sharply. "What?" Jack stepped closer, and she could see emotion burning in his amber eyes. "I care about you, Rosalind. More than I probably should, considering you have only been here a month, but I wake up looking forward to seeing your face. I find excuses to be near the cookhouse just to hear your voice. When you smile, it feels like the sun coming out. So no, I do not give a damn what you did before you came here. That is your past, not mine. What matters is who you are now. And the woman you are now is someone I want around for as long as you're willing to stay." Her breath caught in her throat. "Jack, I am not good with fancy words," he continued, his voice rough. "But I know how I feel. And if some gambler from your old life wants to spread gossip, let him. Anyone who judges you without knowing you is not worth worrying about." "But your reputation will survive," he interrupted. "Rosalind, half the people in this territory are running from something or reinventing themselves. That is what the West is for, a fresh start, a chance to become who you are meant to be. And you are meant to be here." She felt tears spilling down her cheeks, felt the last of her protective walls shattering into dust. "I was a dance hall girl before I came here," she confessed, even though he already knew, needing to say it plainly, to own it completely. "That is your past, not mine," Jack said firmly. "What we build from here, that is ours, together, if you want that, if you want me." I want that, she whispered. I want you, more than I have wanted anything in so long. He closed the distance between them, his hands coming up to frame her face, thumbs wiping away her tears. Can I kiss you? Yes, she breathed. Please, yes. His lips met hers, gentle at first, almost tentative, and then deeper as she leaned into him, her hands clutching his shirt, her heart pounding so hard she thought it might burst from her chest. He tasted like coffee and promises, and kissing him felt like coming home after years of wandering lost. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, he rested his forehead against hers. Stay with me, he murmured. Not just as my cook. Stay with me as my partner, my equal. Marry me, Rosalind. Help me build this ranch into something amazing. Have a life with me. Are you proposing? She asked, hardly daring to believe this was real. I am, he confirmed. I know it is fast. I know we have only known each other a month, but out here we do not have the luxury of long courtships. Life is hard and short and uncertain, and when you find something real, you grab hold of it with both hands. You are real. This is real, and I do not want to waste another day without telling you how I feel. Rosalind felt joy bubbling up inside her chest, bright and effervescent. Yes, she said, yes, I will marry you. Yes to all of it. He kissed her again, and this time there was no hesitation, just pure happiness pouring from both of them. They stood in the cookhouse as darkness fell completely, holding each other, making promises, planning a future that felt suddenly impossibly bright. They were married 3 weeks later in Deadwood, in a small ceremony at the newly built church with Walt and the Cowboys as witnesses. Rosalind wore the green dress she had bought that fateful day in town, and Jack wore a new suit that made him look devastatingly handsome and slightly uncomfortable. The preacher was a circuit rider who asked no questions about backgrounds or pasts, just smiled warmly and pronounced them husband and wife. As they left the church, Rosalind saw Frank Garrett across the street watching. He caught her eye, and for a moment she tensed, but then Jack took her hand, raised it to his lips, and looked at her like she was the most precious thing in the world. And suddenly she did not care who knew about her past. She had Jack. She had the ranch. She had a future. That was all that mattered. The months that followed were the happiest of Rosalind's life. She moved into the main house with Jack, and they spent the winter planning improvements, dreaming about expanding the herd, talking late into the night about everything and nothing. He taught her to ride better, and she taught him to appreciate poetry. They worked side by side, partners in every sense of the word. In February, she realized her monthly courses had not come, and a kind of wondering joy filled her. She waited another month to be sure, and then told Jack one evening as they sat by the fire. His face lit up with such pure happiness that she fell in love with him all over again. A baby, he said, pulling her into his lap, his hand splaying protectively over her still flat stomach. We are going to have a baby. Are you happy? She asked, even though she could see the answer written all over his face. Happy does not even begin to cover it, he said. You have given me everything, Rosalind. A home that feels like one, a future worth building, and now a child. I am the luckiest man alive. Their son was born in October of 1877, a healthy baby with his father's amber eyes and his mother's dark hair. They named him Samuel after Jack's father, and Rosalind discovered that she had never known she could love anything as much as she loved this tiny, perfect human they had created together. Walt and the Cowboys took turns bringing gifts for the baby, hand-carved toys, a tiny pair of boots, a blanket one of the men's wives had knitted. The ranch felt like a family, and Rosalind finally understood what it meant to belong somewhere completely, without reservation or shame. When Samuel was 6 months old, Frank Garrett showed up at the ranch. Rosalind was hanging laundry when she saw him ride up, and her stomach clenched with old fear. But before she could react, Jack was there, stepping between them, his posture protective. "Can I help you?" Jack asked, his voice level but cold. "Just wanted to talk to Rose," Frank said. "Or Rosalind, I guess she's calling herself now." "My wife's name is Rosalind McCord," Jack said firmly, "and unless you have ranch business to discuss, I suggest you leave." Frank looked between them, seemed to see something in Jack's stance that warned him off. "No offense meant," he said, holding up his hands. "Just thought she might want to know that the Alhambra burned down last month. Dodge City is not what it used to be. Lots of folks moving on, starting over elsewhere." Rosalind stepped forward, standing beside her husband. "Thank you for telling me," she said quietly, "but that life is behind me. This is my home now." Frank nodded slowly. "Can see that. You look happy, Rose." "Really happy. I'm glad for you." He rode away, and Rosalind felt a chapter of her life closing with finality. The Alhambra was gone, burned to ashes, just like the girl she had been when she worked there. In her place was this woman, this wife and mother and rancher, someone who mattered, someone who belonged. "Are you all right?" Jack asked, putting his arm around her shoulders. "I am perfect," she said, leaning into him. "I am home." The years rolled by in a blur of hard work and deep satisfaction. The ranch prospered, growing from 800 head to over 2,000. They hired more men, expanded their grazing land, built a larger barn. Samuel grew into a curious, energetic toddler who loved following his father around, trying to help with ranch work. When he was 3, Rosalind gave birth to twin daughters, Emma and Grace, and the house filled with laughter and noise and so much love she sometimes felt her heart could not possibly contain it all. Walt retired from cowboying but stayed on at the ranch, living in a small cabin and helping with light work, becoming a beloved grandfather figure to the children. Billy grew into a top hand and eventually married a girl from Deadwood, bringing her to the ranch where she and Rosalind became close friends. There were hard times too, of course. A drought in 1879 that tested them all, a winter in 1880 that killed 50 head of cattle, the constant challenges of making a living from the land. But they faced everything together, Jack and Rosalind, partners in every storm. On their 10th anniversary, Jack took her back to Deadwood, to the same hotel where she had first arrived, where they had first met. They dressed in their finest clothes and had dinner in the hotel dining room, which had been expanded and now boasted crystal chandeliers and real china. "Do you ever regret it?" Jack asked, holding her hand across the table. "Staying here? Marrying me?" Rosalind looked at this man who had given her everything, who had seen past her history to the woman she could become, who loved her wholly and completely. "Not for one single second," she said. "You saved me, Jack." "No," he said, raising her hand to his lips. "We saved each other." By 1886, the ranch was one of the most successful operations in the Dakota Territory. Samuel was a bright 8-year-old who loved books as much as horses, clearly inheriting his mother's love of learning along with his father's ranching skills. The twins were vivacious 5-year-olds, keeping everyone on their toes. And Rosalind was pregnant again, a surprise baby that she and Jack had laughed about, wondering if they were too old for this at 33 and 37, respectively. The baby was born in April. Another son they named Thomas, and he completed their family in a way Rosalind had not known they needed. She would sit on the porch in the evenings nursing Thomas while watching Samuel teach the twins to ride, with Jack supervising and occasionally calling out instructions, and feel overwhelming gratitude for how her life had turned out. She thought sometimes about the girl she had been, spinning in circles on a dance floor, feeling empty and lost. That girl seemed like a stranger now, someone from a distant story. The woman she had become was strong, capable, deeply loved, and loving in return. She had a partner who valued her, children who adored her, a home that was truly hers. One evening when Thomas was about 6 months old, Rosalind found an old dress at the back of her closet, one of the bright, ruffled dance hall dresses she had kept without really knowing why. She looked at it for a long moment, remembering the woman who had worn it, then took it outside and cut it into cleaning rags. That past had made her who she was, had led her here, but she no longer needed to carry it with her. Jack found her on the porch, the pile of bright fabric scraps beside her. He sat down, putting his arm around her shoulders. Getting rid of old things? Making room for the future, she said, leaning into him. Our future's pretty amazing, he observed, watching their children play in the yard below. It really is, Rosalind agreed. Better than I ever dreamed possible. The years continued to pass, each one bringing new challenges and joys. Samuel grew into a thoughtful young man who surprised everyone by deciding to become a teacher, heading back east to attend college while still planning to return to the ranch eventually. The twins were inseparable, bright and beautiful, and full of spirit. Thomas showed early signs of being a gifted horseman, able to calm even the wildest animals with his gentle presence. In 1895, as Rosalind approached her 42nd birthday, she and Jack sat on their porch watching the sunset, a ritual they had maintained for nearly 20 years. The ranch spread out before them, prosperous and thriving, a testament to 2 decades of hard work and partnership. "Do you remember the day we met?" Jack asked, pulling her close. "Every detail," Rosalind said. "You were loading a wagon. I was terrified you would turn me away." "Best decision I ever made, hiring you," Jack said. "Well, second best. Marrying you was the best?" "Smooth talker," she teased, but she was smiling. "I mean it, though," he said, turning serious. "You made me into the man I always wanted to be, gave me a family, a real home, a reason to build something lasting. I love you more now than I did on our wedding day, and I did not think that was possible." Rosalind felt tears prick her eyes, the good kind. "I love you too. More than words can say. You saw me, Jack. Really saw me. Past what I had been to what I could become. You gave me a chance to be more, to matter. That is the greatest gift anyone has ever given me." They sat in comfortable silence as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold and pink. The house behind them was full of life and laughter, their children, and the future they represented. The land stretched out before them, the ranch they had built together, acre by acre, season by season. By 1900, as the new century dawned, the McCord Ranch was legendary in the region. Samuel had returned with his teaching degree and a lovely young wife, taking over more of the day-to-day operations. Emma had married a neighboring rancher's son, and Grace was engaged to a lawyer from Deadwood. Thomas, at 14, was being courted by multiple ranches who wanted to hire him as a horse trainer once he was old enough. Jack was 51 now, his hair more silver than gold, but still strong and capable. Rosalind was 47, lines around her eyes from years of smiling, her dark hair streaked with gray. They had built something remarkable together, not just the ranch, but a legacy of love and family and second chances. One afternoon, as Rosalind was working in her garden, a woman approached her, young and nervous, with a bruise on her cheek and fear in her eyes. "Excuse me, ma'am," she said hesitantly. "I heard in town that you might be hiring. I can work hard, I can cook and clean, I just need a chance." Rosalind looked at this girl and saw herself 24 years ago, desperate and hopeful, carrying a past and looking for a future. She stood, wiping dirt from her hands. "What is your name?" "Annie," the girl said. "Annie Ford." "What were you doing before you came here, Annie?" The girl's eyes filled with tears. "I was working in a saloon, dancing, but I want something different. I want something better." Rosalind felt her heart expand. She thought of Jack all those years ago, offering her a chance despite her history. She thought of how that one moment of grace had changed everything, had given her a life beyond her wildest dreams. "That is your past, Annie," Rosalind said gently. "Not ours. If you are willing to work hard, there is a place for you here. We always need help, especially with the family growing like it is." Annie's face crumpled with relief and gratitude. "Thank you. Thank you so much." As Rosalind showed Annie around, introducing her to the family, explaining her duties, She caught Jack's eye across the yard. He smiled at her, that warm, knowing smile that still made her heart skip after all these years. He understood what she was doing, offering another lost woman the same chance he had offered her, paying forward the grace they had both received. That night, lying in bed with Jack's arms around her, Rosalind thought about the strange, winding path her life had taken. From an orphaned girl to a dance hall dancer, to a ranch cook, to a wife, mother, and matriarch of a thriving family and business. Every choice, every hardship, every moment of fear and hope had led her exactly where she was meant to be. "What are you thinking about, Chua?" Jack murmured, half asleep. "How lucky I am," she said. "How grateful." "We are both lucky," he said, kissing her temple. "We found each other. That is all that matters." As Rosalind drifted off to sleep, she sent a silent prayer of thanks to whatever forces had brought her to Deadwood that summer day in 1876, had given her the courage to step off that stagecoach, had led her to a man who could see past her history to her heart. She had been so lost back then, so certain she had ruined herself beyond redemption. But redemption, she had learned, was not about erasing the past. It was about building a future so bright that the past lost its power to define you. It was about finding someone who loved you not despite your history, but because of everything that history had taught you, all the strength and resilience and compassion it had forged in your soul. The years continued to unfold, each one adding new threads to the rich tapestry of their life together. Grandchildren arrived, filling the ranch with new energy and joy. Samuel and his wife had 3 children, Emma had 2, Grace eventually had 4, and Thomas surprised everyone by marrying young and starting a family before he was 20. Jack and Rosalind became the beloved patriarch and matriarch of a sprawling family empire. The ranch expanded to over 5,000 acres, employing dozens of people, producing some of the finest cattle in the West. But more than the material success, they had created something intangible and precious, a legacy of love and acceptance and second chances. Annie thrived under their care, eventually marrying Walt's nephew and starting her own small ranch nearby. She never forgot what Rosalind and Jack had done for her, and she carried that grace forward, helping other young women in trouble, offering them the same chances she had received. On their 30th anniversary in 1906, their children threw them a massive party, inviting half the territory. There were speeches and toasts, stories and laughter, a celebration of 3 decades of partnership and love. When Jack stood to speak, the crowd fell silent. 30 years ago, he said, his voice still strong despite his 57 years, I took the biggest risk of my life. I hired a woman I had just met, a woman who was honest about her past, even though it could have cost her the opportunity. That risk became the best investment I ever made. Rosalind, you are my partner, my love, my best friend. Everything good in my life traces back to you. Thank you for saying yes all those years ago. Thank you for building this life with me. Rosalind stood, tears streaming down her face, and kissed him to thunderous applause. Looking around at her children, her grandchildren, the ranch hands and neighboring families who had become like family, she felt overwhelming gratitude for the journey that had brought her here. As the celebration continued late into the night, Rosalind found a quiet moment alone on the porch. Looking out over land she knew as well as her own heartbeat, she thought about the girl she had been, the woman she had become, the love that had transformed everything. Jack found her there, as she had known he would. He always found her, no matter how crowded the room or chaotic the moment. He slipped his hand into hers, and they stood together in the soft darkness, 2 souls who had found each other against all odds and built something beautiful from the ashes of their pasts. "No regrets?" he asked, a question that had become their private joke over the years. "Not a single one," she replied, the answer that was always true. As they walked back into the party together, into the noise and light and love that filled their home, Rosalind thought about how she had once believed she was damaged beyond repair, that her choices had closed off any chance at happiness or respectability or love. How wrong she had been, how gloriously, wonderfully wrong. The truth, she had learned, was simpler and more profound than she could have imagined back then. The past was just the past. What mattered was what you did with your future, who you chose to become, and whether you had the courage to accept grace when it was offered and offer it in return. She had been a dance hall girl before she came here. That was true. That would always be part of her story. But it was not the whole story, not even close. The whole story included a cowboy who saw past her history, a ranch that became home, children who filled her life with purpose, and a love that proved more durable than shame, stronger than judgment, deeper than fear. That was her past. But this, all of this, the family, the ranch, the legacy they were building together, this was their present and future. And it was more beautiful than any dream she had dared to dream in those dark days before she stepped off a stagecoach into the bright Dakota sunshine and found her whole life waiting for her. Years later, as they grew old together, their love only deepened. At 70 years old, Rosalind would still catch Jack looking at her like she was the most precious thing in the world. At 73, Jack still held her hand every evening as they watched the sunset from their porch. Their children were grown with families of their own. Their grandchildren were having children, and the McCord name was synonymous with integrity and success throughout the territory. When Jack passed away peacefully in his sleep in 1918 at the age of 69, Rosalind grieved deeply, but not hopelessly. He had given her 42 years of unwavering love and partnership, and that was a gift beyond measure. She lived another 7 years, spending her time with her family, helping with the ranch, and quietly supporting young women who needed a fresh start. When Rosalind died in 1925 at the age of 72, surrounded by her children and grandchildren, her last thoughts were of Jack, of that first meeting on a dusty Deadwood street, of the life they had built together. She closed her eyes with a smile on her face, grateful for every moment, every challenge, every joy. They buried her beside Jack on a hill overlooking the ranch, and on her headstone, Samuel had them carve the words his father had spoken so many years ago, words that had changed everything. That is your past, not mine. Because in the end, that was the story. Not of a dance hall girl or a cowboy, but of two people who saw past the surfaces to the truth underneath, who chose love over judgment, who built something lasting and beautiful from faith and hard work and grace. A story that echoed through generations, teaching their children and their children's children that the past does not have to define the future, that redemption is always possible, and that love, real love, sees not what you were but what you can become.